Hi everyone, welcome to another video on Jujutsu Kaisen Phantom Parade. And in today's video, I'm going to do a character guide on Incomplete Domain Megumi and how to play him correctly. Now, Incomplete Domain Megumi is definitely one of the best characters in the game. Some might even argue he is the best character in the game. I'm not too sure about that purely because I feel like he's in a bit with chicken and egg situation in the sense that some of the most difficult stages in this game are actually immune to debuff, or debuffers don't really work very well for those stages. A notable example would be, for example, in Illusory Tower Floor 45. Basically, the enemy is immune to debuff, so in Complete Domain Megumi, you have no play there. And also, for example, in Imagined Realm battles, when the enemy actually have two phases, and when they actually enter the second phase, none of the debuff on phase 1 get carried over. So once again, Incomplete Domain Megumi is not the best choice for those kind of stages. However, I do think it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation in the sense that those stages are difficult because you cannot actually play Domain Megumi. If you can actually play him, he will instantly make any stages like 10 times easier. So that's kind of why I don't think it's his fault that he can't be played on the most difficult stages, because they are kind of difficult because you can play him. So that's kind of why it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. But nonetheless, no matter how you say it, he's definitely going to be up there at the top as one of the best characters in the game. Okay. Now, I guess when you first open up, Incomplete Domain Megumi's character page, and you will see it actually says he's an attacker, please ignore that. He's definitely not an attacker. Instead, he's actually going to be a supporter because his main role is actually you putting on debuff on the enemy to increase the damage output for your whole team. He himself is not actually going to do much attack by himself. And as a result, you don't have to play him just in the yellow stages. He can actually be played in all of the different colors, no matter what color the enemy is. Incomplete Domain Megumi is going to be good there because he's just a supporter. He's not there to actually do damage himself. Now, when you also take a look at his skills, you can see there are obviously 4 skills like all the other characters. However, the only ones you really want to pay attention to is going to be his skill 1 and skill 4. And that's because his skill 4 is kind of his bread and butter, it's his domain expansion. Basically, outside of his domain expansion, Megumi pretty much does absolutely nothing in the battle, unfortunately. Like, he has no damage and no utility outside of his domain expansion. However, as soon as his domain expansion is actually out, what's going to happen is that his skill 1 is going to get this insane ability of almost 100% damage taken increase. And because it can stack for 3 turns, what that basically means is on the last turn of his domain expansion, you can actually land the enemy with a 300% damage taken increase debuff, which is by far the highest out of all the supporter out there, and that's kind of what makes him like a top tier supporter and not a damage dealer, not an attacker. Okay, and that's kind of why whenever you play Incomplete Domain Megumi, there's only one thing you want to take note of, that is that how to get his domain expansion out as early as possible so that you can start stacking up his insane debuff on the enemy. Now, does that basically mean you shouldn't be using his skill 2 and skill 3 at all? No, it doesn't, because he also have this characteristic which is basically saying that when the turn starts and his curse energy is less or equal to 15, he's actually going to get ultimate gauge, and obviously the higher ultimate gauge, the quicker he's able to actually charge up his domain expansion. So you still want to play his skill 2 and skill 3. It doesn't really matter which one you want to play. You basically just want to play whichever one available, which is able to spend the most curse energy on you. Okay, so basically it doesn't matter whether the enemy is single target or whether it's AoE, because skill 2 is actually AoE, where skill 3 is single target. It doesn't really matter. Always use the one which is able to cost the maximum amount of curse energy for you. So if you have enough, if you have at least 25, then always use skill 3, no matter who the enemy is, whether single target or AoE. Or if you don't have 25, then always try to use skill 2 if you have at least 15. Once again, doesn't matter whether the enemy is single target, doesn't matter whether the enemy is AoE, just use it. Okay, there's absolutely zero reason of why you want to save up curse energy on Domain Megumi. You should always spend as much as possible every single turn. Okay, now the other thing you may also want to know is that do you actually want to awaken Incomplete Domain Megumi? Because when you actually awaken him to his dupe 2, you're going to get plus 10 curse energy. Now, this one, I feel like it's kind of up to you. I think if it's just literally between the difference between dupe 1 and dupe 2, I probably wouldn't. However, if it's actually the difference between dupe 1 and dupe 3 or dupe 4, because you have at least 2 or 3 dupe, then I might just go for it in order to get all of the other extra HP buff, etc., to make sure your Domain Megumi is actually bulkier, because he's actually quite squishy. You definitely don't want him to die too early before you can even release his domain expansion. Now, if you're actually thinking, but what if he gets this extra 10 curse energy? Does that mean he won't actually trigger his passive as easily? To be honest, it doesn't really matter for vast majority of time, because even if you have him at dupe 2 or higher, what's going to happen is that he's just going to start off with 40 curse energy. And so basically what that means is on the first turn, you're going to spend 25. And then that basically means at the start of the second turn, you're going to have 15, or you are going to have exactly 15 curse energy. So you can still trigger his passive. Now, this passive actually get triggered before your natural curse energy regeneration every single turn. So basically, that basically means on the second turn, you're going to start off with 15 curse energy. You're going to get this passive triggered first, and only after this is triggered, you then get the plus 10 curse energy regeneration every single turn. So you don't really need to worry if I actually have a dupe 2, does that mean I won't actually get this buff at the start of the second turn? It doesn't really matter. You are still able to trigger that off. The only time it's actually going to make a bit of a difference is that if you actually have something like a mutual trust, or if you actually play Kaito, who's going to increase even more curse energy on top of the plus 10 from your dupe 2, then yes, you may actually run into a situation where you won't be able to actually trigger this passive on the second turn. But to be honest, in those situations, you should just avoid playing Kaito or avoid playing mutual trust, and then you wouldn't get into that situation anyway. So that's kind of why I wouldn't say it's too much of a handicap to have him at higher than dupe 2. But once again, remember, dupe 2 comparing dupe 2 and dupe 1, the only thing you're going to get extra, it's going to be this plus 10 curse energy and also a tiny bit of those buffs, but they don't really matter. It's only kind of dupe 3 or higher where you actually don't get the extra stats from HP and also curse technique and physical technique. So I'll definitely say avoid having him at exactly dupe 2. However, if dupe 1 or dupe 3 or higher, I think it's absolutely fine. It doesn't really matter too much, okay? Now, the next thing I want to talk about is going to be what Recollections should they actually play on your incomplete Domain Megumi. And once again, if you remember, the only thing you want him to do is get his domain expansion out as early as possible. And if that's the case, basically the choice of Recollection is going to be very obvious. You want something which is able to increase his ultimate gauge for you. And basically there are two winners out of all of them. The first one is going to be in excellent shape. Basically this one's able to guarantee 360 ultimate gauge. This is because you can activate this is kind of like guaranteed, and that basically allow you to be able to charge up your ultimate gauge as early as 10-3 by playing Unity and also Toge on the same field, on the same team. So let me just show you quickly now. Now, I don't actually know how the RNG is going to play out, whether the enemy is actually going to hit my incomplete Domain Megumi, because when he get hit, he would obviously actually increase his ultimate energy as well. But I can tell you, even without getting hit, it doesn't really matter. I can guarantee I am able to charge up on 10-3 anyway. So basically what you want to do is you activate Unity and also you use the skill 2 on Toge. My incomplete Domain Megumi got hit, but like I said, it doesn't really matter whether he's hit or not, because what you're going to see here is that I am then able to charge up straight away at the start of turn 3. And basically then I can actually use my domain expansion straight away as well. So it really doesn't matter who else is on the team, or whether Domain Megumi actually get hit or not. By playing the combination of Unity, Toge, and also in excellent shape, you can guarantee in any kind of circumstances you are able to pull off your domain expansion on turn 3. Okay, so that's kind of why this is a very good choice. Now, in sometimes you may actually feel like turn 3 is not early enough. You maybe actually want to do it even quicker, and then there's actually going to be one choice where you can actually try to trigger his ultimate energy, trigger his domain expansion on turn 2, and that's going to be with this Recollection, which is Desperate Resistance. And basically the idea here is that when his HP is less than 50%, you can actually recover 1000 ultimate gauge. Now this is going to be a bit more RNG dependent, because first of all, the enemy need to hit Domain Megumi, and second of all, it needs to hit him hard enough such that it gets his HP less than 50%. However, if you do actually pull this off, and then combination with Unity, it doesn't really need to be Toga here. It can be Yaga, for example, any kind of buffer. Basically, what this can then allow you to do is that you're able to trigger this guarantee, because this can give you 1000 ultimate gauge when you have the extra Unity, 35% from Unity, and then obviously from the actual attack Incomplete Domain Megumi is going to use, and also the extra when the curse energy is going to be less than 15, and also because he actually got hit by the enemy in order to get his HP less than 50%. This is basically going to guarantee you to be able to use this on his domain expansion on turn 2. So that's going to be the other suitable option for Incomplete Domain Megumi in terms of Recollections. Now, so based on that, what Recollection should you play, and also what kind of team do you actually want to play in? Now, the team you want to play in is basically going to be dependent on what DPS you're going to have on your team, and that is because you basically want to sync up the ultimate attack on your DPS to when your Domain Megumi is able to actually land 3 stacks of his debuff. Because remember, this only lasts for 3 turns, and also this can only happen when his domain expansion is out. So that basically means that Incomplete Domain Megumi actually need a solid 4 turns in order to set everything up for your DPS. So depending on which turn you actually want your DPS to nuke, you kind of then need to work backwards to know which turn do I have to make sure my Incomplete Domain Megumi actually have his ultimate ready by. So I'm going to take an example. For example, if I play Gojo, right, Satoru Gojo, and because he is going to leave the battle on turn 7, what that basically means is that I have to guarantee my Incomplete Domain Megumi can definitely use his ultimate attack on turn 4, because what happens is that I can do it on turn 4, and then on turn 5, turn 6, turn 7, I can do the 3 stacks of his skill 1 for the debuff, and then I can nuke with my Gojo on turn 7. And if the only thing I need with my Incomplete Domain Megumi is to get his ultimate ready on turn 4, what that basically means is that I no longer need to play the RNG with Desperate Resistance. I can just go with in excellent shape, and because I only need to get it on turn 4, I don't even need Toge on my field, and basically I can then go into the battle straight away with 3 supporters. So for example, Yaga, Gakuganji, and also Incomplete Domain Megumi, because they all give different type of buff, and that's how you can maximize the amount of damage. So that's basically the setup you want to do if you actually want to nuke on turn 7. However, what if I actually play, for example, Pride on my Gojo, and instead I actually want to nuke on turn 6, because basically what happens on turn 6, I can get 2 stack of Pride available on my DPS. And if this is actually going to be the case, then what you then realize is that if I walk backwards from turn 6, I need my Incomplete Domain Megumi to use his ultimate attack ready as early as turn 3. And if I just use this setup, there's no way I can actually guarantee that. And instead, what you then need to do is I then need to play Toge. And basically the role of Toge is to make sure, like how I showed you earlier, the combination of Toge and also Unity and also in excellent shape can guarantee him to be able to use domain expansion on turn 3, and therefore actually sync up with my Gojo's ultimate attack with the 2 stack of Pride on turn 6. So that potentially could be something you want to do. And if you actually play it this way, then you realize, okay, Toge is there needed on the first turn in order to increase his ultimate energy for the whole team. However, afterwards, he doesn't really need to do much. So what you then may want to do is that on your Toge, you actually want to play a taunt Recollection to make sure the Toge actually get killed off as early as possible. And then instead, in the backup option, you then have Gakuganji to come in. And once again, you can then have the combination of those 3 characters in order to maximize your damage output, okay? And that's basically, for example, the example setup of how you want to do it if you actually want to ult on turn 6. And then what happens if you actually want to ult even earlier, because maybe the enemy is actually going to use a insane special attack on turn 5, and you can't really wait till turn 6 to nuke. Maybe you have to play non-standard and actually nuke on turn 5 or something like that. And if that's actually the case, then you would then realize, okay, in excellent shape doesn't really matter anymore, because instead I need to get my domain expansion out as early as turn 2, and the only way I can do that is going to be actually playing Desperate Resistance and to make sure my Domain Megumi can actually get his HP less than 50% in order to actually trigger that. Yes, there's RNG, but that's the only way of how to get my domain out on turn 2. And if I'm then playing that, I then realize, okay, I don't actually need the skill 2 from my Toga anymore because I can already guarantee turn 2 ult with a combination of Unity and Desperate Resistance. And also Toga would apply damage reduction, which is not actually very helpful if I want my Incomplete Domain Megumi's HP to drop less than 50%. And if that's the case, once again, Toga is then going to be useless, and you then may want to remove Toga and then play Gakuganji in the main team straight away. And maybe with this setup, you can then have another debuffer, for example, Momo to come in the case one of your support actually died too early, for example. So that's basically, a few different examples of how the setup may be looking like, depending on what turn you actually want to nuke with your you actually want to nuke with your DPS. So before you decide to set up a team for Incomplete Domain Megumi, please choose your DPS first and have a rough idea which turn you actually want to use your ult. And then once you realize that, you then work backwards to know which turn you actually want to start your domain expansion on your Megumi. And depending on the turn that you need to get that ready, that will then determine the teammate and also the recollection you're going to play in your team setup. And that is basically kind of the correct way of how to actually play Incomplete Domain Megumi.